I'm Emma Rodriguez, 29, and I'm the head of client relations at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm where I've worked for the past 4 years. Last month, I single-handedly saved our company from bankruptcy by securing a $2.3 million contract with Hartwell Industries, our dream client that we'd been chasing for over 2 years. Instead of the promotion and raise I expected, my boss called me into his office yesterday and informed me that due to budget constraints, my salary was being cut by $15,000. What he doesn't know is that I've been building a relationship with Hartwell's CEO for months, and she just offered me something that will destroy everything he's worked for. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you'll want to hear how this plays out. Like and subscribe because this story gets so much better. Before we jump back in, tell me where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me take you back to 3 months ago, when everything started to unravel. I was walking past the conference room when I heard Richard Morrison's voice through the glass walls, tense and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. He was on a call with someone from the bank, and the words cash flow crisis and 30 days made my blood run cold. Morrison & Associates wasn't just struggling. We were dying. The company that had been my professional home for 4 years, where I'd built my career from junior account coordinator to head of client relations, was hemorrhaging money faster than we could bring it in. I pressed myself against the wall, listening as Richard explained to whoever was on the other end that we needed just a little more time to secure a major contract. That's when I knew I had to act. Hartwell Industries had been our white whale. For over 2 years, every marketing firm in the city had pitched them, and they'd turned everyone down. Their CEO, Diana Hartwell, was notoriously selective about partnerships, preferring to keep most of their marketing in-house rather than trust external agencies. But I had something others didn't. I'd been quietly studying their company culture, their values, their recent expansion into sustainable technology. While other firms pitched generic strategies, I spent weeks crafting a proposal that spoke directly to their mission of environmental responsibility and corporate innovation. Next morning, I walked into Richard's office with my laptop and a confidence I hoped I could sustain. "I have an idea about Hartwell Industries," I said, watching his face transform from skeptical to desperate hope as I outlined my strategy. For 2 weeks, I lived and breathed that proposal. I worked 16-hour days, researching every aspect of Hartwell's business, analyzing their competitors, and developing a comprehensive marketing strategy that would position them as leaders in the green technology space. I created mock-ups, data projections, and a presentation that I practiced until I could deliver it in my sleep. The day of the pitch, I walked into Hartwell's sleek downtown offices wearing my best suit and carrying 4 years of professional experience and 2 weeks of intensive preparation. Diana Hartwell sat at the head of a polished conference table, her sharp eyes evaluating every word I spoke. When I finished my presentation, the room was silent for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then Diana smiled. Not the polite, dismissive smile I'd expected, but something genuine and impressed. "Ms. Rodriguez," she said, "this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we've been looking for. We'd like to move forward with Morrison & Associates." The contract was worth $2.3 million over 18 months. It wasn't just a win. It was salvation. 47 jobs saved, the company's reputation restored, and our financial future secured. I remember calling Richard from my car in Hartwell's parking lot, my hands shaking with excitement and relief. "You did it," he said, and for a moment I heard genuine gratitude in his voice. "Emma, you actually did it. You saved us all." I drove back to the office expecting celebration, recognition, maybe even that promotion to senior client relations director that had been dangled in front of me for months. I imagined Richard calling an all-hands meeting to announce the win, acknowledging the effort that had gone into securing our biggest client ever. Instead, I got a brief, "nice work," and watched as Richard took full credit for the partnership in his email to the board of directors. But I told myself that was fine. I knew what I'd accomplished, and surely the recognition would come. After all, actions like this didn't go unnoticed in a company our size. How wrong I was. Richard Morrison inherited Morrison & Associates when his father passed away 5 years ago, and from day one, it was clear that leadership wasn't in his DNA. Where his father had been a visionary who built the company from nothing, Richard was a trust fund baby who saw the business as his personal piggy bank rather than a responsibility to his employees. At 38, Richard had the kind of arrogance that comes from never having to earn anything. He drove luxury cars, took expensive vacations, and treated the company's success as his birthright, rather than something that required effort and sacrifice. His office was filled with expensive art and furniture that cost more than some of our employees made in a year. I'd been with the company for 4 years, starting as a junior account coordinator fresh out of college, and working my way up through pure determination and results. I'd brought in clients, exceeded every target, and consistently delivered beyond expectations. My loyalty to Morrison & Associates wasn't just professional, it was personal. This place had given me my start, and I'd poured my heart into making it successful, which is why what happened next felt like a knife to the back. 3 weeks after saving the company, Richard called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. I expected a performance review, maybe a discussion about that overdue promotion. Instead, I found him leaning back in his leather chair, twirling a set of BMW keys around his finger like some kind of victory trophy. "Emma, come in. Sit down," he said with that fake smile he reserved for uncomfortable conversations. "I wanted to talk to you about some changes we're implementing." I settled into the chair across from his desk, noting the stack of papers in front of him and the way he avoided eye contact. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't have imagined what was coming. "As you know, we're still working through some financial challenges," he began, and I almost laughed. Financial challenges? We'd just secured the biggest contract in the company's history. The board has asked me to implement some cost-cutting measures across all departments. The BMW keys caught the light as he set them on his desk, next to what I now realized was a stack of salary adjustment forms. My stomach dropped. "I'm afraid we're going to have to reduce your salary by $15,000, effective immediately," he said, delivering the news like he was discussing the weather. "I know it's not ideal, but everyone has to make sacrifices during difficult times." For a moment I couldn't speak. The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. I had literally saved this company from bankruptcy, and his response was to cut my pay? While he sat there with brand new car keys, wearing a watch that cost more than my annual salary reduction? "I'm sorry. What?" I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me. "It's temporary, of course," he said quickly, as if that made it better. "Once we're back on solid ground, we'll revisit compensation across the board." I stared at him, this man who had inherited everything handed to him, who had never fought for anything in his life, who was punishing me for my own success. The injustice of it was breathtaking. "Richard," I said carefully, "I just brought in a $2.3 million contract. I saved 47 jobs, including yours, and your response is to cut my salary?" He shifted uncomfortably, and I saw a flash of something. Guilt, fear, cross his face. "Emma, I know you're upset, but this isn't personal. It's just business. Just business." As if destroying someone's financial security and career prospects was just another line item on a spreadsheet. As if my 4 years of loyalty and dedication meant nothing. I stood up slowly, my hands surprisingly steady as I picked up the salary reduction letter from his desk. The official letterhead made it real, made it legal, made it a betrayal I could never forgive. "I understand," I said, though I understood far more than he realized. I understood that loyalty was a one-way street in his world. I understood that my value to him was exactly what he was willing to pay for it. And I understood that I had just made the biggest mistake of my professional life by trusting him. As I walked out of his office, I heard him call after me about team players and difficult times. But all I could think about was those BMW keys glinting on his desk, and how someone who could afford a luxury car lease had just told me we couldn't afford to pay me what I was worth. That's when I knew our relationship was over, even if he didn't realize it yet. Diana Hartwell wasn't what I expected when I first walked into that conference room 3 months ago. At 42, she had the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Sharp, intelligent eyes, silver-streaked hair she wore with confidence, and the rare quality of actually listening when people spoke. Most CEOs I'd worked with treated agency representatives like necessary evils, people to be tolerated during presentations and forgotten afterward. Diana was different. During our initial pitch meeting, she asked thoughtful questions, challenged my assumptions in ways that made me think harder, and showed genuine interest in the strategic thinking behind my proposals. What started as a professional relationship evolved into something more valuable: mutual respect. After we signed the contract, Diana suggested we meet monthly to review campaign progress and discuss industry trends. These weren't typical client meetings. They were conversations between two professionals who appreciated each other's expertise. Our first coffee meeting was at a small cafe near her office. Nothing fancy or formal. Diana arrived with a leather portfolio and genuine curiosity about my background. "Tell me how you ended up at Morrison & Associates," she said, stirring her coffee. "Your approach is more sophisticated than what I typically see from agencies your size." I explained my journey from college graduate to head of client relations, my passion for strategic marketing, and my belief that the best campaigns came from truly understanding a client's mission rather than just their budget. Diana nodded thoughtfully, sharing her own experiences building Hartwell Industries from a small environmental consulting firm into a major player in the green technology space. "You know," she said as we prepared to leave, "I've worked with a lot of agencies over the years. Most of them see us as a contract to be managed. You see us as a business to be understood. That's rare." Over the following months, our coffee meetings became something I looked forward to. Diana would share insights about industry trends, challenges she was facing with expansion into new markets, and her vision for Hartwell's future. I'd discuss marketing strategies, campaign performance, and my observations about consumer behavior in the sustainability sector. More importantly, Diana became a mentor without either of us formally acknowledging it. She'd ask about my career, goals, my challenges at Morrison & Associates, and my thoughts on leadership in the marketing industry. Her questions were always thoughtful, never intrusive, but I could tell she was evaluating more than just campaign metrics. "Emma," she said during one of our meetings, about 6 weeks before Richard's betrayal, "have you ever considered what you'd do if you weren't at Morrison & Associates? I mean, long-term career planning." The question surprised me. "I hadn't really thought about it," I admitted. "I've been focused on growing within the company, maybe eventually making partner." Diana's expression was unreadable as she sipped her coffee. "It's always good to keep your options open. The marketing industry is changing rapidly, and the best opportunities often come from unexpected directions." At the time, I thought she was just offering general career advice. Looking back, I realized she was already evaluating possibilities, already seeing potential that I couldn't see in myself. Our relationship deepened beyond professional courtesy into genuine friendship. Diana would text me articles she thought I'd find interesting, invite me to industry events where she was speaking, and introduce me to other executives in her network. She never made it feel like charity or condescension, just one professional helping another navigate a complex industry. The business card in my wallet had become more than just contact information. It represented a connection to someone who valued my ideas, respected my capabilities, and saw potential in me that my own boss couldn't recognize. Diana's card was embossed, elegant, with her direct line and personal email, details she didn't share with every business contact. During our most recent meeting, just 2 weeks before the salary cut, Diana had been more direct than usual. "How are things at Morrison & Associates?" she asked, and something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer might be complicated. "Challenging," I said honestly. "We're doing well with the Hartwell contract, but there are always internal dynamics to navigate." She nodded knowingly. "Richard Morrison has quite a reputation in the industry, not all of it positive." I was surprised by her candor. "You know Richard? We've crossed paths at industry events. Let's just say his approach to business and employee relations is well known among executives who pay attention to such things." That conversation stayed with me, especially the way Diana's eyes had lingered on my face when she mentioned Richard's reputation. She knew something I didn't. Or maybe she simply recognized the signs of a toxic work environment that I was still too loyal to acknowledge. When I walked out of Richard's office with that salary reduction letter in my hand, Diana's business card felt like a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. For the first time in 4 years, I had somewhere to turn that wasn't connected to Morrison & Associates. Someone who knew my worth even when my own boss had forgotten it. I pulled out my phone and stared at her contact information, wondering if she'd meant what I hoped she meant during all those conversations about keeping options open. There was only one way to find out, and after what Richard had just done to me, I had nothing left to lose. The business card represented more than just a potential escape route. It represented validation that I was worth more than Richard Morrison would ever recognize. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a cup of tea growing cold beside me. The salary reduction letter lay next to my keyboard like evidence of a crime, and in many ways that's exactly what it was. A crime against loyalty, against fairness, against everything I thought I understood about professional relationships. Opened my personal journal, something I'd kept sporadically over the years, but found myself turning to more often during stressful times. Writing helped me process emotions, and right now, I needed clarity more than anything else. Today changed everything, I wrote. 4 years of dedication, of staying late, of going above and beyond, of literally saving the company, and this is how Richard repays me. A $15,000 salary cut while he drives around in a brand new BMW. I keep thinking there must be some mistake, some explanation that makes this make sense, but there isn't. This is who he is, and I've been too naive to see it. The words poured out, faster than I could type them. All the frustration, the disbelief, the anger I'd kept professional and controlled in his office came flooding onto the page. I've been loyal to a company that sees me as expendable, to a boss who values my contributions right up until they inconvenience his lifestyle. What does that say about me? What does that say about my judgment? But as I wrote, something else emerged beneath the hurt and anger. A cold, strategic clarity I hadn't expected. Diana Hartwell sees something in me that Richard never has. She asks about my career goals, introduces me to her network, treats me like a peer rather than an employee to be managed. Maybe it's time I stopped thinking like someone who needs to be grateful for scraps and started thinking like someone who has options. I saved the document and closed my laptop, staring at Diana's business card on the table. Our last conversation replayed in my mind. Her pointed questions about Morrison and Associates, her comments about Richard's reputation, her advice about keeping options open. Had she been preparing me for this moment? Had she seen this betrayal coming before I did? The next morning, I made the call. Diana Hartwell's office. This is Sandra. Hi, Sandra. This is Emma Rodriguez from Morrison and Associates. Is Diana available for a brief conversation? Let me check her schedule. She's in meetings all morning, but I can see if she has a few minutes between appointments. While I waited on hold, my heart hammered against my ribs. What was I doing? Was I really considering leaving the company I'd devoted 4 years of my life to? Was I letting anger cloud my judgment? Emma, Diana's voice, came through the phone with genuine warmth. What a nice surprise. How are you? I'm having one of those career moments where I could use some perspective from someone I trust, I said, choosing my words carefully. There was a pause, and when Diana spoke again, her tone had shifted to something more focused, more attentive. Those kinds of moments are usually significant. Are you free for lunch today? I have an opening at noon if you can make it downtown. I'd really appreciate that, I said, relief flooding through me. Thank you, of course. Let's meet at the Metropolitan Grill. Do you know it? It's quiet enough for a real conversation. After I hung up, I sat in my car for several minutes, processing what I'd just done. I'd reached out to a client's CEO for career advice, crossing a line I'd never crossed before. But Diana hadn't sounded surprised or uncomfortable. If anything, she'd sounded like she'd been expecting this call. I spent the rest of the morning going through the motions at work, responding to emails and attending meetings while my mind raced with possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. What if Diana had something concrete to offer? What if this conversation led somewhere beyond just venting my frustrations? By the time I left for lunch, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to this meeting as a victim seeking sympathy. I was going as a professional exploring options, as someone who finally understood her own worth, even if her current employer didn't. The drive downtown gave me time to prepare mentally. Diana had seen something in me during our months of professional relationship. Intelligence, strategic thinking, the ability to deliver results under pressure. She'd watched me navigate complex client needs, build successful campaigns, and consistently exceed expectations. She knew what I was capable of, perhaps better than Richard ever had. As I pulled into the parking garage near the Metropolitan Grill, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different than she had that morning. More determined, more confident, more ready to take control of her own destiny. Whatever happened in this lunch meeting, I knew one thing for certain. I was done accepting less than I was worth. Richard had taught me that loyalty without reciprocity was just exploitation in disguise. It was time to see what mutual respect and recognition actually looked like in a professional relationship. Diana's business card had been my lifeline when I needed it most. Now it was time to see where that lifeline led. The Metropolitan Grill was exactly the kind of place where serious business conversations happened. Elegant, but not ostentatious, with private booths that allowed for confidential discussions. Diana was already seated when I arrived, reviewing something on her tablet with the focused attention I'd come to associate with her approach to everything. She looked up as I approached, offering that genuine smile that had become so familiar over our months of working together. Emma, perfect timing. I ordered us some sparkling water to start. I hope that's all right. Perfect, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. The restaurant receipt from this lunch would later become a symbol of the moment my life changed direction, though I didn't know it at the time. So, Diana said, setting aside her tablet and giving me her full attention. Tell me what's on your mind. You sounded like you were processing something significant. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. Yesterday, Richard informed me that my salary is being cut by $15,000, effective immediately. This is 3 weeks after I secured the Hartwell contract that literally saved the company from bankruptcy. Diana's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not surprise, but confirmation of something she'd already suspected. I see. And his reasoning? Budget constraints, I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. This from a man who was spinning the keys to his new BMW while he delivered the news. Ah, Diana said quietly, and somehow that single syllable conveyed more understanding than any lengthy expression of sympathy could have. And how are you feeling about this development? Honestly, betrayed, furious, and increasingly clear that I've been undervaluing myself for years. The honesty felt liberating. I've given Morrison and Associates everything I had, and this is how Richard chooses to show his appreciation. Diana nodded thoughtfully as our server approached to take our orders. After we'd made our selections and were alone again, she leaned forward slightly, her demeanor shifting to something more focused. Emma, I'm going to be direct with you because I respect you too much to dance around what I'm thinking, she said. I've been watching you work for months now. Your strategic thinking, your client management skills, your ability to deliver results under pressure, these are exactly the qualities I look for in senior leadership. My heart started beating faster, but I forced myself to listen rather than jump to conclusions. Hartwell Industries is expanding rapidly, Diana continued. We're opening a new division focused specifically on marketing and brand strategy for emerging green technologies. I need someone to head that division, someone who understands both the marketing landscape and our company culture. She paused, studying my face. The position would start at $120,000 annually, plus equity participation and performance bonuses. You'd have your own team, significant autonomy, and the opportunity to help shape how we present ourselves to the world. The numbers hit me like a physical force. Not only was she offering me nearly double my current salary, my reduced salary, but she was offering me the kind of professional growth and recognition I'd been dreaming about for years. Diana, I started, then stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was proposing. There's something else you should know, she said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. The Hartwell contract with Morrison and Associates was always intended to be a trial period. We wanted to see how the partnership developed, how our teams worked together, how results matched projections. She met my eyes directly. Based on what I've observed over the past 3 months, I can tell you that the partnership hasn't met our expectations. Your work has been exemplary, but the overall relationship with Morrison and Associates has been disappointing. The implications of what she was saying began to sink in. Are you saying you're considering terminating the contract? I'm saying that we've already made that decision, Diana said quietly. The formal notification will be sent next week. Our legal team is finalizing the language, but it's a done deal. The restaurant noise faded into background as I processed this information. Richard had cut my salary to save money, not knowing that his biggest source of revenue was about to disappear anyway. The irony was almost too perfect. The question is, Diana continued, what you want to do with this information. I'm offering you a position that would begin in 2 weeks, which would give you time to submit appropriate notice at Morrison and Associates. Or, if you prefer to stay and see how things develop there, I understand that choice too. I stared at her, this woman who had seen potential in me that my own boss couldn't recognize, who was offering me not just an escape route, but a genuine career advancement opportunity. Can I ask why you're offering this to me? I mean, specifically, why me? Diana smiled. Because over the past 3 months, you've demonstrated something that can't be taught: the ability to think strategically while executing flawlessly. You've shown integrity, creativity, and the kind of leadership presence that makes other people want to follow you. Those qualities are rare, Emma, and they're exactly what we need for this new division. She signaled for the check. I don't need an answer today. Take the time you need to think it through. Discuss it with whoever you need to discuss it with. But I want you to know that this offer is genuine, and it's based on months of observing your professional capabilities. As we prepared to leave, Diana handed me a formal document I hadn't noticed her carrying. That's the detailed job description and compensation package. Review it carefully and call me when you're ready to talk. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was floating. In the span of an hour, everything had changed. The betrayal that had felt so devastating yesterday now seemed like the catalyst for something extraordinary. Richard's short-sighted cruelty had pushed me toward an opportunity I never would have pursued otherwise. The receipt from that lunch, $67.50 for 2 salads and sparkling water, would become one of my most treasured possessions, proof of the moment when my real career began. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Diana's job offer documents spread across my nightstand, like evidence of a future I hadn't dared to imagine 24 hours earlier. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers. $120,000 annual salary, equity participation, performance bonuses, figures that represented not just financial security but professional validation. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and moved to my kitchen table with my laptop. If I was going to spend the night thinking, I might as well be productive about it. I opened a new document and began typing. Resignation letter. Draft. Nerv1, Dear Richard. Please accept this letter as my formal resignation from Morrison & Associates, effective 2 weeks from today's date. My last day of employment will be date. This decision comes after careful consideration of my career goals and professional development opportunities. While I have valued my time with the company and appreciate the experience I've gained here, I have decided to pursue a position that offers greater alignment with my long-term objectives. I'm committed to ensuring a smooth transition of my responsibilities, and will work diligently over the next 2 weeks to wrap up current projects and assist in training my replacement. Thank you for the opportunities you have provided me during my tenure here. Sincerely, Emma Rodriguez. I stared at the formal language, so polite and professional, giving no hint of the betrayal that had prompted it. The letter felt surreal. After 4 years of dedication, my relationship with Morrison & Associates was about to be reduced to this single page of corporate courtesy. But even as I wrote it, doubts crept in. Was I making a mistake driven by emotion rather than logic? Was I throwing away 4 years of investment in a company where I understood the culture, the clients, the systems? Was I letting Richard's betrayal cloud my judgment about what was best for my career? I saved the document and opened my journal instead, needing to work through the complexity of what I was feeling. I keep thinking about loyalty, I wrote. For 4 years, I've been loyal to Morrison & Associates, staying late, going above and beyond, turning down other opportunities because I believed in building something here. I've been loyal to Richard, even when his decisions didn't make sense, even when he took credit for my work, even when he overlooked me for promotions I'd earned. But what has that loyalty gotten me? A salary cut when I should have gotten a raise, punishment for success, the realization that I've been giving everything to someone who sees me as disposable. Diana's offer isn't just about money, though the financial difference is staggering. It's about working for someone who values what I bring to the table, who sees potential for growth rather than just someone to manage. It's about respect, something I realize I haven't had at Morrison & Associates for a long time. I paused, thinking about the conversations I'd had with Diana over the past months, the way she listened to my ideas, challenged my thinking, and treated me like a peer rather than a subordinate. The truth is, I continued writing, I've been settling. I've been so grateful for the opportunity Morrison & Associates gave me as a new graduate that I never stopped to ask whether it was still the right place for me as an experienced professional. I've been thinking like someone who should be thankful for whatever she gets, instead of someone who has earned the right to choose her own path. Richard's betrayal isn't the end of something. It's the beginning. It's the push I needed to stop accepting less than I'm worth. By dawn, I had filled pages with thoughts, fears, excitement, and analysis. I'd written 3 different versions of my resignation letter, each one more confident than the last. I'd made lists of pros and cons, calculated the financial impact of Diana's offer, and analyzed every aspect of the decision from multiple angles. But underneath all the rational analysis, I knew what I was going to do. Richard had shown me exactly how much my loyalty was worth to him. Negative $15,000. Diana was offering me not just more money, but the opportunity to work for someone who recognized my value without having to fight for it. As the sun came up, I opened my laptop one more time and created a final document. Resignation letter. Final version. Dear Richard, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from my position as head of client relations at Morrison & Associates. My final day of employment will be date, providing 2 weeks' notice as required. I have accepted a position elsewhere that better aligns with my professional goals and provides opportunities for growth that are not available in my current role. During my remaining time here, I will ensure all client relationships are properly transitioned and all current projects are completed or handed off appropriately. Thank you for the experience I have gained during my 4 years with the company. Sincerely, Emma Rodriguez. This version was shorter, more direct, and gave no opening for negotiation or guilt trips. It was professional but not apologetic, respectful but not deferential. It was the letter of someone who had made a decision and was moving forward with confidence. I printed it out and set it on my kitchen counter, next to Diana's offer documents, 2 pieces of paper that represented the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard's attempt to devalue me had led directly to an opportunity where my value was not only recognized but rewarded. His betrayal had become my liberation, though he didn't know it yet. Now I just had to find the courage to walk into his office and hand him that letter, knowing that once I did, there would be no going back. Before I made any final decisions, I needed to understand exactly what I was walking away from and what I was potentially leaving behind. As head of client relations, I had access to financial reports and budget documents that most employees never saw. If I was going to resign, I wanted to do it with full knowledge of Morrison & Associates' true financial situation. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and settled into my desk with a cup of coffee and a sense of purpose. I pulled up the company's financial management system and began methodically reviewing documents I'd never paid close attention to before. What I found was shocking, but not in the way I expected. The company wasn't in financial crisis, not anymore. The Hartwell contract had indeed saved us, providing enough cash flow to stabilize operations and even show a modest profit for the first time in 8 months. Our accounts receivable showed healthy numbers, our expenses were manageable, and our projections for the next quarter were actually optimistic. So why the salary cuts? Why the talk of budget constraints and difficult times? I dug deeper, accessing expense reports and departmental budgets that painted a very different picture than the one Richard had presented. In the 3 months since securing the Hartwell contract, Morrison & Associates had indeed tightened some belts, but not Richard's. His expense reports told a story of stunning hypocrisy. The BMW lease, $1,200 per month. A new office furniture set, $15,000. Business lunches, at restaurants that charged more for a single meal than most of our junior staff made in a day. A client development trip to Hawaii that had produced exactly 0 new business, but had cost the company $8,000. Meanwhile, the salary reduction memo I'd been given was part of a broader cost-cutting initiative that affected only non-management employees. Richard had cut salaries across the board for account coordinators, junior staff, and department heads, while simultaneously increasing his own expense account allocation. The numbers were damning. My $15,000 salary reduction would save the company exactly $15,000 annually. Richard's BMW lease alone cost the company $14,400 per year. His office furniture cost the equivalent of my entire salary cut. His Hawaii trip cost more than half my annual reduction. But the most infuriating discovery was in the executive compensation documents. While cutting my salary and those of other key employees, Richard had approved a performance bonus for himself based on the successful acquisition of the Hartwell contract, the contract I had secured through my own efforts. The bonus amount, $50,000. I stared at the screen, my hands actually shaking with rage. Richard had not only failed to recognize my contribution to saving the company, he had actively rewarded himself for my success, while punishing me financially for the same achievement. I printed out key documents, carefully selecting pages that told the story without including anything confidential or proprietary. Richard's expense reports were company records I had legitimate access to as part of my job responsibilities. The salary reduction memo had been given to me directly. The executive compensation summary was part of the quarterly reports I received. As a department head, as I reviewed the evidence, a pattern became clear. This wasn't just about my salary cut. It was about a fundamental misalignment between Richard's priorities and the company's well-being. He was treating Morrison and Associates like his personal financing vehicle, extracting maximum benefit for himself while minimizing investment in the people who actually generated revenue. The other salary reductions affected some of our most valuable employees. Sarah Chen, our best graphic designer, had lost $8,000 annually. Marcus Thompson, who managed our digital marketing campaigns, had been cut by $12,000. These were people whose skills and dedication directly contributed to client satisfaction and business success. Meanwhile, Richard's assistant, who happened to be his college roommate's daughter, had received a raise. The office manager, who was married to Richard's golf partner, had been promoted with a substantial salary increase. The pattern of favoritism was so blatant it was almost comical. I gathered all the documents into a file folder, creating a comprehensive picture of Morrison and Associates' real financial situation. The company was healthy, profitable, and positioned for growth, if it was managed responsibly. But under Richard's leadership, it was being slowly drained to support his lifestyle, while the people who made success possible were being punished for their contributions. The irony was perfect. Richard's greed and poor judgment had created the exact conditions that would drive away his best employees. By cutting my salary while rewarding himself for my work, he had pushed me toward an opportunity that would ultimately cost him far more than the money he was trying to save. As I locked the documents in my desk drawer, I realized that my decision to leave wasn't just about self-respect anymore. It was about escaping a sinking ship before Richard's mismanagement dragged everyone down with him. The financial records had confirmed what Diana had already recognized. Morrison and Associates was being poorly led by someone who prioritized personal gain over company success. My resignation wouldn't just be a loss for Richard. It would be a preview of the larger exodus that was inevitable if he continued managing the company like his personal checking account. Looking at those expense reports one more time, I felt the last traces of guilt about leaving disappear. Richard had made his priorities clear, and I wasn't one of them. It was time to work for someone who valued results over relationships, performance over politics, and merit over favoritism. Diana's offer was looking better by the hour. I called Diana from my car during lunch break, needing privacy for what I knew would be a career-defining conversation. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and professional. "Emma, I was hoping to hear from you. Have you had time to review the offer?" "I have," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. "And I'd like to accept the position." There was a pause, then what sounded like genuine pleasure in Diana's voice. "That's wonderful news. I was hoping that would be your decision, but I wanted to give you the space to make it without pressure. Can we discuss the details? Start date, transition timeline, that sort of thing?" "Of course. Why don't you come by my office this afternoon? Say 4 o'clock? We can finalize everything, and I can introduce you to some of the team you'll be working with." After hanging up, I sat in my car for several minutes, processing what I'd just done. In a single phone call, I'd changed the trajectory of my entire career. Tomorrow I would submit my resignation to Richard. In 2 weeks, I'd be working for someone who valued my contributions enough to offer me nearly double my current salary. The afternoon meeting with Diana was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Her office was impressive but not intimidating. Floor to ceiling, windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that suggested success without ostentation, and walls lined with awards recognizing Hartwell Industries' innovation in sustainable technology. "Before we get into the paperwork," Diana said, gesturing for me to take a seat at a small conference table, "I want to share something with you. About 10 years ago, I was in a situation similar to yours." She poured 2 cups of coffee from an elegant service set and settled across from me. I was working for a consulting firm, pouring my heart into building their environmental practice. I brought in major clients, developed innovative strategies, and consistently exceeded every metric they gave me. And my boss, a man who'd inherited his position rather than earned it, took credit for my work while simultaneously undermining my advancement within the company. The parallels to my own situation were unmistakable, and Diana's expression told me the comparison was intentional. The breaking point came when he passed me over for a promotion I'd earned, giving it instead to his golf buddy's son who had half my experience and none of my results. That's when I realized that loyalty to someone who doesn't value you isn't loyalty. It's self-sabotage. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze direct and understanding. I left that firm and started Hartwell Industries, with 3 employees and a dream. Best decision I ever made. Not because leaving was easy, but because staying would have slowly destroyed my confidence and my career. That's exactly how I've been feeling, I admitted, like I was waiting for permission to value myself the way I should have all along. Diana smiled. The beautiful thing about recognizing your worth is that other people start recognizing it too, which brings me to this. She slid a formal document across the table. The official job offer, complete with salary details, benefit package, equity, participation, and start date. Everything was exactly as she'd described, but seeing it in writing made it feel real in a way the verbal offer hadn't. Your start date is 2 weeks from Monday, which should give you time to provide appropriate notice at Morrison & Associates. Your initial team will consist of 3 marketing specialists and a graphic designer, with plans to expand as our new technology launches require additional support. She walked me through the organizational structure, my reporting relationships, and the strategic goals for the new division. The scope of responsibility was both exciting and intimidating. I'd be building something from the ground up, with the autonomy to develop strategies and implement programs without the micromanagement I'd grown accustomed to at Morrison & Associates. There's one more thing, Diana said as we concluded the formal discussion. I want you to know that the timing of this offer wasn't coincidental. I've been planning to bring you aboard for weeks, but I wanted to wait until you were ready to see the opportunity clearly. What do you mean? I mean that I've watched you navigate a challenging work environment with grace and professionalism, and I could see that you were undervalued and undercompensated. The salary cut was the final confirmation I needed that Richard Morrison doesn't understand what he has in you, or rather, what he had in you. She stood and walked to her desk, returning with a small envelope. Inside is your formal offer letter, along with some additional information about our company culture and benefits package. Review everything carefully, and if you have any questions, call me directly. As I prepared to leave, Diana extended her hand for a handshake that felt more like a welcome than a goodbye. Emma, I want you to know that this decision, choosing to value yourself and pursue an opportunity that recognizes your worth, is the mark of a true leader. I'm excited to see what you'll accomplish with the right support and resources. Walking back to my car, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in months. The weight of uncertainty had been replaced by anticipation. The frustration of being undervalued had been transformed into excitement about new possibilities. The formal job offer in my briefcase represented more than just a new position. It was validation that my skills, experience, and strategic thinking were valuable enough for someone to compete for. Diana hadn't just offered me a job. She'd offered me the opportunity to build something meaningful with someone who understood and appreciated what I brought to the table. Tomorrow, I would walk into Richard's office and hand him my resignation letter. But tonight, I was going to celebrate the beginning of a new chapter in my career, one where my contributions would be recognized, my growth would be supported, and my loyalty would be reciprocated. For the first time in months, the future looked bright. I arrived at the office the next morning with my resignation letter sealed in an envelope and a calm determination I hadn't felt in years. Richard's assistant wasn't at her desk yet, so I knocked directly on his office door, hearing his distracted come in from behind the closed door. He was on a phone call when I entered, his back to me as he looked out the window while discussing what sounded like weekend golf plans. He held up one finger without turning around, a gesture that would have irritated me yesterday, but now seemed perfectly representative of his priorities. When he finally ended the call and swiveled his chair to face me, I was already seated across from his desk with the envelope in my hands. Emma, good morning. What can I do for you? I have something for you, I said, sliding the envelope across his desk. My resignation letter. I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. For a moment, Richard just stared at the envelope like it might explode. Then he picked it up with the kind of careful movement people use when handling something they don't quite understand. I'm sorry. What? He said, though I could tell he'd heard me perfectly. I'm resigning from Morrison & Associates. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. He opened the envelope and read the letter quickly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something approaching panic. Emma, I don't understand. Is this about the salary adjustment? Because we can discuss that. This isn't a negotiation, Richard, I said calmly. I've accepted another position that better aligns with my career goals and professional development. Needs. Another position? He set the letter down and leaned forward, suddenly focused in a way I hadn't seen since the day I'd told him about landing the Hartwell contract. Where? What company? I'll be joining Hartwell Industries as head of their new marketing division. The color drained from Richard's face as the implications hit him. Hartwell Industries? Our client, Hartwell Industries? Yes, but that's a conflict of interest. You can't work for a client. There are non-compete clauses. Confidentiality. Agreements. I pulled out my copy of my employment contract, which I'd reviewed carefully the night before. Actually, there aren't. Morrison & Associates has a standard non-compete clause that prevents me from working for direct competitors in the marketing industry for 6 months. Hartwell Industries isn't a marketing company. They're a technology company that's bringing their marketing function in-house. Perfectly legal. Richard's hands were actually shaking now as he picked up my resignation letter again, reading it more carefully, as if he might find some loophole that would prevent this from happening. Emma, let's be reasonable here. You're upset about the salary situation. I understand that, but leaving the company isn't the answer. We can work something out, maybe restore some of the reduction, or look at a performance bonus structure. Richard, I said, keeping my voice level and professional. 3 days ago, you cut my salary by $15,000 after I saved this company from bankruptcy. Yesterday, I reviewed your expense reports and discovered that you've spent more on your BMW lease and office furniture than you're saving through my salary reduction. Today, I'm giving you my resignation. This isn't a negotiation. It's a consequence. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him processing the reality of the situation. The Hartwell contract will remain in effect until its natural conclusion, I said. My resignation doesn't affect existing agreements between our companies. What I didn't tell him was that Diana had already decided to terminate the contract anyway. That news would come soon enough, and it would be far more devastating when he realized he'd lost both his best employee and his biggest client in the same week. You can't do this, he said, but there was no authority in his voice anymore, just desperation. I won't accept your resignation. We need you here, especially with the Hartwell account. You already accepted it when you decided my contributions were worth $15,000 less than they were a month ago, I replied. I'm not asking for your permission, Richard. I'm informing you of my decision. I stood up, suddenly eager to end this conversation and begin my transition period. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll ensure all my client relationships are properly documented and transitioned. I'll work with whoever you designate to take over my responsibilities. Emma, please, he said, and for the first time since I'd known him, Richard Morrison sounded genuinely vulnerable. Can we at least discuss this? Maybe there's a way to make this work for everyone. I paused at his office door, looking back at this man who had taught me so much about leadership, mostly what not to do. Richard, you had 4 years to discuss my value to this company. You chose to cut my salary instead. I'm simply accepting your assessment and acting accordingly. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel eyes on me from around the office. Word of my resignation would spread quickly in a company this size, and I knew there would be questions, speculation, and probably some concern about what my departure meant for everyone else. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in years at Morrison & Associates, complete clarity about my worth and my future. Richard's betrayal had been painful, but it had also been educational. It had taught me the difference between loyalty and self-respect, between gratitude and settling for less than I deserved. The resignation letter on Richard's desk was more than just a formal notification. It was a declaration of independence from someone who had never truly valued what I brought to his company. In 2 weeks, I would walk out of Morrison & Associates for the last time, leaving behind 4 years of gradually diminishing returns on my investment of time, energy, and dedication. The next chapter of my career was about to begin, and for the first time in months, I couldn't wait to see what came next. Within an hour of my resignation meeting, Richard's panic became visible to the entire office. I watched from my desk as he made a series of increasingly frantic phone calls, his voice carrying through his supposedly soundproof office walls whenever his volume rose with frustration. The first call was to HR, demanding to know about non-compete clauses and whether there was any legal way to prevent my departure. The second was to the company's lawyer, a conversation that grew heated when he apparently didn't get the answers he wanted. By the third call, to someone he kept addressing as Dad, presumably the company founder. His desperation was audible, even from my desk 20 feet away. "She can't just leave," I heard him say during a brief lull in office noise. "Not now. Not with everything we have riding on the Hartwell account." That's when the reality of his situation truly hit me. Richard had never bothered to build relationships with our major clients. He showed up to signing ceremonies and annual review meetings, but the day-to-day management, the strategic planning, the problem-solving that kept clients satisfied, all of that had been delegated to people like me while he focused on golf games and expense account lunches. Around noon, Richard emerged from his office with a file folder and headed straight for Marcus Thompson's desk. Marcus handled our digital marketing campaigns and was one of the most competent people on our team, but he'd had minimal direct contact with Hartwell Industries beyond implementing strategies I'd developed. "Marcus, I need you to take over the Hartwell account immediately," Richard said, loud enough for half the office to hear. "Emma is transitioning to other responsibilities." Marcus looked confused and slightly panicked. "The Hartwell account?" "Richard, I don't even have access to their files. Emma's been the sole point of contact for months." "Well, get access. Figure it out. You're smart. You can handle this." I watched this exchange with a mixture of sympathy for Marcus and amazement at Richard's complete failure to understand how client relationships actually worked. You couldn't just transfer a complex strategic partnership by handing someone a file folder and hoping for the best. By afternoon, Richard's panic had evolved into increasingly desperate attempts to reach Diana Hartwell directly. I could see him, at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, waiting on hold for what appeared to be extended periods. His assistant made at least 4 calls to Hartwell Industries that I witnessed. Each one met with the polite but firm response that Ms. Hartwell was unavailable. The email Richard sent to the board of directors, which I knew about because he'd copied me, presumably to demonstrate that he was managing the situation, was a masterclass in deflecting responsibility while trying to maintain control of a rapidly deteriorating situation. "Board members," it began, "I want to make you aware of a personnel situation that requires our immediate attention. Emma Rodriguez has submitted her resignation from Morrison & Associates, citing career development opportunities elsewhere. While this is obviously disappointing, I want to assure you that we have robust systems in place to ensure continuity of service for all our clients, particularly our strategic partnership with Hartwell Industries. Emma's departure is part of a broader reorganization I've been planning to optimize our client service delivery and eliminate redundancies in our account management structure. Marcus Thompson, one of our most capable team members, will be taking over primary responsibility for the Hartwell relationship, with my direct oversight ensuring seamless continuity. I've already initiated contact with Diana Hartwell to introduce Marcus and confirm our continued commitment to delivering exceptional results. This transition actually provides us with an opportunity to strengthen our partnership by bringing fresh perspectives and innovative approaches to their marketing challenges. I'll keep you updated as this transition progresses, but I want to emphasize that Morrison & Associates remains strongly positioned for continued growth and success. Reading that email was almost surreal. Richard had managed to reframe my resignation, as part of his strategic planning, positioned my departure as an opportunity rather than a crisis, and claimed credit for a reorganization that existed only in his imagination. The disconnect between his public confidence and his private panic was breathtaking, but what struck me most was his complete failure to understand the real implications of what was happening. He was so focused on trying to maintain control of the Hartwell account that he hadn't stopped to consider why I might be leaving, what other clients might think about the instability, or how his salary reduction decision had created this entire situation. Around 4 p.m., I received an urgent email from Richard requesting a transition meeting to discuss the Hartwell account handover. The subject line was marked "Urgent, Client Continuity," and the tone suggested he was finally beginning to grasp the scope of the problem. The meeting, scheduled for first thing the next morning, would be interesting. Richard would finally have to confront the reality that client relationships couldn't be transferred like file folders, that trust and rapport were earned over months of consistent performance, and that his decision to cut my salary had directly led to the loss of his most valuable employee. As I packed up my desk that evening, I noticed several colleagues watching me with expressions that ranged from curiosity to concern. Sarah from graphic design approached as I was gathering my personal items. "Emma, is it true you're leaving?" she asked quietly. "Yes, I've accepted a position elsewhere. My last day is 2 weeks from today." Can I ask where you're going? I hesitated, then decided there was no point in secrecy. Hartwell Industries. I'll be heading their new marketing division. Sarah's eyes widened. Wow, that's a big opportunity. Good for you. But I could see the question she wasn't asking. If someone as valuable as me was leaving, what did that mean for everyone else? If the head of client relations felt the need to jump ship, how stable was Morrison and Associates really? Those were good questions. And over the next 2 weeks, Richard was going to get some very uncomfortable answers. The call came on Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd submitted my resignation. I was at my desk, working through client files and preparing transition documents, when Richard's office door flew open, with enough force to rattle the glass walls. "Emma!" he called across the office, his voice tight with something between panic and rage. "My office. Now." I gathered my notepad and walked calmly toward his office, aware that every pair of eyes in the space was watching this drama unfold. Richard was pacing behind his desk, a piece of paper clutched in his hand like evidence of a crime. "Sit down," he said, though he continued pacing. "We need to talk." "What's the matter, Richard?" He stopped pacing and threw the paper onto his desk. It was a formal letter on Hartwell Industries letterhead, and even upside down, I could see Diana's signature at the bottom. "They're terminating the contract," he said, his voice hollow. "Hartwell Industries is ending our partnership, effective immediately." I picked up the letter and read it carefully, though I already knew what it would say. Diana's legal team had crafted the language perfectly. Professional, courteous, and absolutely final. "Dear Mr. Morrison," it began, "after careful review of our current marketing partnerships and strategic objectives, Hartwell Industries has decided to terminate our service agreement with Morrison and Associates, effective immediately. This decision reflects our ongoing commitment to aligning our marketing initiatives with our long-term business strategy and organizational structure. We appreciate the work Morrison and Associates has provided during our partnership and will ensure that all outstanding invoices are processed promptly. Per the terms of our agreement, this termination requires 30 days' notice, which this letter provides. We wish you and your team continued success in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Diana Hartwell, Chief Executive Officer." The language was carefully neutral, giving no specific reason for the termination beyond strategic objectives and organizational structure. But Richard and I both knew exactly what those euphemisms meant. Hartwell Industries was bringing their marketing function in-house, and they were bringing me with them. "You knew about this," Richard said. "And it wasn't a question. I knew it was a possibility," I replied honestly. "Diana mentioned during our working relationship that they were considering bringing marketing in-house." "A possibility?" Richard's voice was rising. "This is a $2.3 million contract, Emma. This isn't a possibility. This is the difference between profit and bankruptcy." I stayed calm, though part of me was enjoying watching him finally understand the consequences of his decisions. "Richard, you cut my salary by $15,000 3 weeks after I secured this contract. Did you really think there wouldn't be ramifications? So this is revenge? You convinced them to cancel the contract because you're angry about a temporary salary adjustment? This isn't revenge," I said, standing up to leave. "This is business. Diana Hartwell is a smart CEO who makes decisions based on what's best for her company. Apparently she doesn't think Morrison and Associates is best for her company anymore." Richard slumped into his chair, the letter still in his hands. "We can't survive without this contract. The cash flow, the overhead, the staff, maybe you. Should have thought about that before you decided to punish your most valuable employees while rewarding yourself with BMW leases and Hawaiian vacations." The color drained from his face. "How do you know about—" "I'm the head of client relations, Richard. I have access to financial reports. I know exactly how this company spends its money. And I know exactly how little you value the people who generate that money." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "Emma, please, can you talk to Diana? Explain that this is a misunderstanding? Maybe if you stayed, if we worked out the salary situation." "My last day is next Friday," I said without turning around. "I suggest you use the next week to figure out how you're going to explain to the board why you lost your biggest client in the same week you lost your head of client relations." Walking back to my desk, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Richard was finally understanding the real cost of his betrayal, but that understanding was coming too late to save either our professional relationship or his company. The rest of the office had heard enough of the conversation to understand that something catastrophic had happened. Conversation stopped as I walked past, and I could feel the tension in the air as people began to process the implications of what they'd witnessed. Marcus Thompson appeared at my desk within minutes. "Emma, what's happening?" "Richard just called me into his office and told me the Hartwell contract is ending." "It's true," I said simply. "They're bringing their marketing function in-house, but that was our biggest account. Without that contract, No, Marcus, I'm sorry." He lowered his voice. "Is this related to your resignation?" I met his eyes directly. "Marcus, I can't control what decisions other companies make about their business strategies. All I can tell you is that Hartwell Industries has decided that Morrison & Associates is no longer the right partner for their marketing needs." Over the next hour, I watched Richard make increasingly desperate phone calls, trying to reach Diana, trying to reach anyone at Hartwell Industries who might be willing to discuss the termination. Each call ended the same way: polite but firm refusals to engage in conversation about a decision that had already been made. The contract termination notice wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a death sentence for Morrison & Associates' financial stability. Richard had built the company's entire business model around the assumption that the Hartwell contract would continue indefinitely, using that steady cash flow to justify expenses and commitments that the company couldn't sustain without it. Yet, the day progressed. Word of the contract termination spread through the office despite Richard's attempts to keep it quiet. I could see the fear in people's faces as they began to understand what this meant for their job security, their projects, their futures. Sarah from graphic design stopped by my desk again that afternoon. "Emma, people are saying Hartwell Industries canceled their contract. Is that true?" "You'd have to ask Richard about client relationships," I said diplomatically. "But if it's true, what does that mean for the rest of us?" I looked at this talented, dedicated employee who deserved so much better than the uncertainty Richard's mismanagement had created. "Sarah, all I can tell you is that you're a valuable professional with strong skills. Whatever happens here, you'll land on your feet." It wasn't much comfort, but it was the best I could offer. Richard's betrayal hadn't just damaged my career, it had put every employee at Morrison & Associates at risk. His decision to cut salaries while maintaining his lifestyle had created a chain reaction that would ultimately destroy the company he'd inherited. The irony was perfect. In trying to save money by devaluing his employees, Richard had lost the client relationship that made the company viable. His $15,000 savings had cost him a $2.3 million contract. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it kicks down the door. By Monday morning, the office atmosphere had shifted from tense to desperate. Word of the Hartwell contract termination had leaked throughout the building, and I could see people having hushed conversations in small groups, their expressions ranging from worried to panicked. The first resignation letter after mine came from Marcus Thompson. He approached my desk Tuesday morning with an envelope in his hand and a look of grim determination on his face. "Emma, I wanted you to know before I tell Richard," he said quietly. "I'm putting in my notice today. I got an offer from Digital Dynamics. It's not huge money, but it's stable. And after everything that's happening here, I think that's smart, Marcus," I said honestly. "You're talented, and you deserve to work somewhere that values that talent. Would you be willing to serve as a reference? I know you're leaving too, but you know my work better than anyone." "Of course. I'd be happy to." As Marcus walked toward Richard's office with his resignation letter, I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't intended to trigger an exodus when I decided to leave Morrison & Associates, but I also couldn't deny that Richard's mismanagement had created the conditions that made leaving feel like the only sensible option for anyone with marketable skills. The domino effect was swift and brutal. Sarah from graphic design submitted her resignation Wednesday morning, having been recruited by a former colleague at a design firm downtown. Two of our junior account coordinators gave notice Thursday, both having found positions with competing agencies who were eager to hire away Morrison & Associates talent while the company was in chaos. Each resignation sent Richard into a fresh spiral of panic and denial. I watched him cycle through the stages of grief in real time: anger at employees who were abandoning the team, bargaining with counteroffers he couldn't afford, depression as he realized the scope of what was happening, and finally a desperate acceptance that his company was hemorrhaging talent faster than he could replace it. The breaking point came Friday morning when Jenny Martinez, our office manager and one of the company's longest tenured employees, submitted her resignation. Jenny had been with Morrison & Associates for 8 years, had survived 3 different reorganizations, and was widely considered the institutional memory of the company. If Jenny was leaving, It meant she'd lost faith in the company's ability to survive. "I've been offered the operations manager position at Hartwell Industries," she told me privately as she cleaned out her desk. "Diana Hartwell called me personally yesterday. She said you'd mentioned that I was someone who really understood how to keep a company running smoothly. I had mentioned Jenny during one of my transition meetings with Diana, noting that she was one of the few people at Morrison & Associates who truly understood the operational side of the business. But I hadn't expected Diana to recruit her directly. That's a wonderful opportunity, Jenny. You deserve it. I feel terrible about leaving at a time like this," she said, gesturing toward Richard's office where we could see him on yet another frantic phone call. "But I have 2 kids and a mortgage. I can't stay somewhere that might not exist in 6 months. You don't owe this place anything more than you've already given," I assured her. Richard created this situation through his own choices. The mass resignation letters piling up on Richard's desk told a story of managerial failure so complete it was almost artistic. In the span of 2 weeks, Morrison & Associates had lost its head of client relations, its digital marketing manager, its best graphic designer, 2 junior coordinators, and its office manager. The remaining staff were either actively job hunting or too junior to have many options. What made the exodus even more devastating was that these weren't just random departures. They were strategic defections by people who understood the company's real situation and had the skills to find better opportunities. The employees who remained were largely those who couldn't leave easily, creating a downward spiral of declining capabilities just when the company needed its best people most. The other clients began to notice. I fielded several calls during my final week from contacts at other companies who had heard rumors about instability at Morrison & Associates. Some were concerned about continuity of service for existing projects. Others were bluntly asking if they should be looking for new agencies. "Emma, I'm hearing some concerning things about Morrison & Associates," said David Chen, the marketing director at one of our mid-size clients. "People are saying there's been a lot of turnover, that the Hartwell contract got canceled. Should we be worried about our project timelines?" I chose my words carefully. "David, I can only speak to my own situation. I've accepted a position elsewhere and will be transitioning my responsibilities over the next few days. You should speak directly with Richard about any concerns regarding service continuity." But the subtext was clear. If the head of client relations was leaving along with most of the experienced staff, Morrison & Associates was not a stable partner for important marketing initiatives. Richard's attempts to stem the exodus were simultaneously desperate and ineffective. He offered counterproposals to people who had already mentally checked out, promised raises he couldn't afford to people who no longer trusted his promises, and tried to guilt-trip employees into staying by talking about loyalty and teamwork concepts that rang hollow coming from someone who had demonstrated neither. The most pathetic moment came when he called an all-hands meeting Thursday afternoon to address rumors and misconceptions about the company's stability. Standing in front of a conference room that was half empty due to resignations and job interviews, Richard delivered a speech about temporary challenges and exciting opportunities for growth that convinced no one and fooled even fewer. "No, there have been some changes recently," he said, his voice lacking any conviction. "But I want everyone to know that Morrison & Associates is financially strong and positioned for continued success. The departure of a few team members, actually, gives us the opportunity to bring in fresh talent and new perspectives." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the employees who remained knew that losing nearly half your staff in 2 weeks wasn't a strategic opportunity. It was a catastrophic failure of leadership. As I sat in that meeting, watching Richard try to spin disaster as opportunity, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was the inevitable consequence of his betrayal, the natural result of prioritizing personal gain over company health. But it was also the destruction of a place that had been my professional home for 4 years. A place that had good people who deserved better leadership. The resignation letters scattered across Richard's desk weren't just employment terminations. They were votes of no confidence in his ability to lead. Each one represented a talented professional who had decided that their skills and dedication were worth more than Morrison & Associates was willing to pay, literally and figuratively. In trying to save money by cutting salaries, Richard had triggered an exodus that would cost him far more than any raise would have. Sometimes the most expensive decision you can make is the one that appears to save money in the short term. My first day at Hartwell Industries felt like stepping into a different universe. The building itself was impressive, sleek glass, and steel construction with solar panels integrated into the design, living walls in the lobby featuring plants that naturally purified the air, and a reception area that managed to be both welcoming and professional without the sterile corporate feeling I'd grown accustomed to. Diana met me in the lobby personally, something I couldn't imagine Richard ever doing for a new employee. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit but wore it with the ease of someone comfortable in her own authority. "Emma, welcome to Hartwell Industries," she said, extending her hand with a genuine smile. "I'm excited to show you around and introduce you to the team." The elevator ride to the executive floor gave me a moment to process the magnitude of the change I'd made. 2 weeks ago, I'd been dreading coming to work, feeling undervalued, and increasingly frustrated with Richard's leadership. Today, I was walking into an environment where my expertise was not just welcomed, but had been specifically recruited. "Your office is on the 7th floor, Diana explained as we walked down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. "I wanted you to have natural light and a view of the city. I find that environment affects creativity and strategic thinking more than people realize." She stopped in front of a corner office that was larger than Richard's at Morrison & Associates, with windows on 2 walls and a view that stretched across downtown to the harbor. The furniture was modern but comfortable, the kind of space that invited both focused work and collaborative meetings. "This is incredible," I said, setting my briefcase on the desk that would become my command center for building Hartwell's new marketing division. "The real gift isn't the office," Diana said, handing me a key card and a small silver key. "It's the autonomy that comes with it. You have the authority to hire your team, develop your strategies, and implement your vision without having to get approval for every decision. I hired you because I trust your judgment. Now I want you to use it." The key card would give me access to all areas of the building, but the small silver key was for my office, a tangible symbol of ownership and responsibility that I'd never had at Morrison & Associates. Our first stop was the conference room where I'd be meeting my initial team. 3 marketing specialists and a graphic designer had already been hired, all of them experienced professionals who had been recruited specifically to work under my leadership. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Emma Rodriguez, your new director," Diana announced as we entered the room. "Emma comes to us with extensive experience in strategic marketing and client relationship management, and she'll be leading our efforts to position Hartwell Industries as the premier name in sustainable technology." The introductions were warm and professional. Lisa Chen, a digital marketing specialist with experience at Fortune 500 companies. Michael Torres, a content strategist who had previously worked for environmental nonprofits. Amanda Foster, a social media expert who understood how to build authentic brand engagement. And James Wright, a graphic designer whose portfolio showcased exactly the kind of clean, modern aesthetic that would work perfectly for Hartwell's brand evolution. "I know you're all eager to get started," I said after the introductions. "But I want to begin by understanding what drew each of you to Hartwell Industries and what you hope to accomplish here." The responses revealed exactly why Diana had been so successful in building her company. These weren't just talented professionals looking for paychecks. They were people who believed in Hartwell's mission of sustainable innovation and wanted to be part of something meaningful. "I've been watching Hartwell Industries for 2 years, Lisa said. "The work you're doing in green technology isn't just good business. It's necessary for the future. I want to help tell that story in a way that resonates with both consumers and industry leaders." "For me," Michael added, "it's about authentic messaging. Too many companies talk about sustainability as a marketing angle. Here, it's built into the DNA of everything you do. That authenticity gives us a foundation for communication that most brands would kill for." After the team meeting, Diana walked me through the broader company structure, introducing me to department heads, showing me the research and development labs where Hartwell's innovations were created, and explaining the strategic vision that would guide my marketing efforts. "Our goal isn't just to sell products," she explained as we toured the R&D facility. "We're trying to fundamentally change how businesses think about technology's role in environmental responsibility. That's a complex message that requires sophisticated marketing, which is why I needed someone with your strategic capabilities." The contrast with my experience at Morrison & Associates was stark. There, I'd been managing client relationships and implementing strategies within narrow parameters, always having to justify my decisions and fight for resources. Here, I was being asked to think bigger, to develop comprehensive strategies that would position an entire industry leader for long-term growth. By lunchtime, I'd been introduced to what felt like half the company, all of whom seemed genuinely excited about the new marketing division and eager to collaborate. The cafeteria served locally sourced food with multiple vegetarian and vegan options, and even that small detail reflected the company's commitment to values beyond just profit. "How are you feeling about everything so far?" Diana asked as we sat down with our salads. "Honestly, a little overwhelmed, but in the best possible way," I admitted. "The scope of opportunity here is so much broader than what I was doing before." "That's intentional," Diana said. "I could have hired someone to simply execute marketing tactics, but I wanted someone who could think strategically about how marketing fits into our overall business objectives. You've demonstrated that capability repeatedly over the past few months." The afternoon was spent in planning sessions, budget reviews, and strategic discussions that energized me in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Instead of justifying every expense and having my ideas second-guessed, I was being asked to think creatively about how to achieve ambitious goals with substantial resources and complete executive support. As the day ended, I found myself standing in my new office, looking out at the city lights and processing the enormity of the change in my professional circumstances. 3 weeks ago, I'd been grateful for a job that undervalued my contributions and frustrated me daily. Today, I was leading a division at a company that had specifically recruited me for my strategic thinking and given me the autonomy to implement my vision. The small silver key sat on my desk next to my new business cards, both symbols of the respect and authority that came with working for leaders who valued talent rather than simply managing it. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about going to work tomorrow. Diana's decision to recruit me hadn't just given me a better job, it had given me the opportunity to discover what I was actually capable of when I worked in an environment that supported, rather than constrained, my professional growth. As I locked my office and headed home, I couldn't help but think about Richard and the chaos I'd left behind at Morrison & Associates. His betrayal had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for the best career opportunity I'd ever received. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. The phone call from the business Journal reporter came 3 months after Morrison & Associates' bankruptcy filing. I was in my office reviewing campaign metrics for Hartwell's new sustainable technology launch when my assistant buzzed me. "Emma, there's a journalist from the Metro Business Journal on line 2. She's writing a feature about rapid career advancement in the tech sector and specifically wants to interview you." The article, published 2 weeks later, would become one of my most treasured professional accomplishments, not because of the publicity, but because of what it represented: validation that my journey from betrayed employee to division director was noteworthy enough to inspire others facing similar challenges. Rising star: how one marketing executive turned workplace betrayal into career success, ran as the cover story, complete with a professional photo of me in my corner office at Hartwell Industries. The reporter, Sarah Kim, had done her research thoroughly, interviewing not just me, but also Diana, several of my new team members, and even some former colleagues from Morrison & Associates. The article told the story with remarkable accuracy. A dedicated employee who had saved her company from bankruptcy, only to have her salary cut by the very boss she'd rescued. It detailed my transition to Hartwell Industries, the subsequent collapse of Morrison & Associates, and the rapid growth of the marketing division I now led. But what struck me most was how the reporter framed the broader lessons of the story. "Rodriguez's experience illustrates a critical truth about modern workplace dynamics," the article stated. "Loyalty without reciprocity is not just professionally unsustainable, it's personally destructive." Her decision to leave Morrison & Associates wasn't just about money, it was about recognizing her own value when her employer failed to do so. The article included quotes from Diana that still give me chills when I read them. "Emma represents the kind of strategic thinking and leadership capability that companies fight to recruit. The fact that her previous employer failed to recognize this value says more about their leadership failures than her capabilities. We're fortunate that their loss became our gain." More impactfully, the piece included commentary from Marcus Thompson, who had landed successfully at Digital Dynamics after leaving Morrison & Associates. "Emma's resignation was like a wake-up call for all of us," he was quoted as saying. "It made us realize that we'd been accepting treatment that we never should have tolerated. Her courage to leave gave the rest of us permission to value ourselves appropriately." The article also mentioned the fate of Morrison & Associates, though diplomatically. The rapid collapse of Rodriguez's former employer following her departure highlights the risks companies face when they undervalue their most productive employees. Industry analysts suggest that Morrison & Associates' failure stemmed from a combination of poor financial management and inability to retain key talent during challenging periods. Richard was mentioned only briefly, and only through his attorneys. Previous statement about market conditions. The reporter had clearly tried to reach him for comment, but he had declined to participate in the story. His silence spoke volumes about his understanding of his role in the company's destruction. The most gratifying part of the article was its focus on the success I'd achieved at Hartwell Industries. In just 6 months, our marketing division had launched 3 major campaigns, increased brand awareness by 40%, and generated over 15 million in qualified leads for the sales team. The division had grown from 4 employees to 12, and we were projected to double again by year-end. Rodriguez's rapid success at Hartwell Industries demonstrates what can happen when talented professionals are given the resources and autonomy to excel, the article concluded. Her story serves as both a cautionary tale for employers who take loyal employees for granted and an inspiration for professionals who may be undervaluing their own contributions. The article generated more attention than I'd expected. My LinkedIn notifications exploded with connection requests from other marketing professionals. Several speaking invitations arrived, and I received emails from people sharing their own stories of workplace betrayal and career transformation. But the most meaningful response came from Diana, who stopped by my office the day the article was published. "I hope you're proud of how this turned out," she said, holding a copy of the magazine. "Not just the article, but everything you've accomplished since joining us." "I am," I said, and meant it completely. 6 months ago, I thought loyalty meant accepting whatever treatment I received. Now I understand that real loyalty has to be mutual. "That's a lesson that took me years to learn," Diana replied. "You learned it much more quickly, which probably explains why you've been so successful here." The Business Journal article became more than just a career milestone. It became a symbol of what was possible when you refused to accept less than you were worth. Every time I looked at the framed copy on my office wall, I was reminded that Richard's betrayal hadn't diminished me. It had revealed my true value to someone who was wise enough to recognize it. Sometimes the best publicity comes not from promoting your successes, but from surviving your setbacks with enough grace and determination to inspire others facing similar challenges. The invitation to speak at the Young Professionals Network monthly meeting came 6 months after the Business Journal article was published. Standing in front of 80 ambitious professionals in their 20s and 30s, I held my speech notes and looked out at faces that reminded me of myself just a year earlier. Talented, dedicated, but perhaps not fully aware of their own worth. "How many of you have ever felt undervalued at work?" I began, watching as nearly every hand in the room went up. "How many have stayed in situations where your contributions weren't recognized because you were grateful for the opportunity?" Fewer hands this time, but still more than half. "I want to tell you about the best thing that ever happened to my career," I continued, which was also the worst betrayal I've ever experienced. I shared my story with complete honesty. The 4 years of loyalty, the contract that saved Morrison & Associates, the salary cut that felt like a knife in the back, and the decision to leave that had seemed terrifying at the time, but had led to opportunities I never could have imagined. The speech notes in my hand represented weeks of careful thought about what I'd learned from my experience, and how those lessons might help others avoid the mistakes I'd made. Not the mistake of leaving Richard. That was the best decision I'd ever made. But the mistake of staying too long, of accepting less than I was worth, of confusing gratitude with settling. The first lesson, I told the audience, is that loyalty must be reciprocal. If you're giving everything to an employer who gives you nothing in return except a paycheck, that's not loyalty. That's exploitation. Real loyalty flows both ways, with employers investing in their employees' growth and employees contributing their best efforts in return. I saw nodding heads throughout the room, people recognizing their own situations in my words. The second lesson is that knowing your worth isn't arrogant, it's essential. I spent 4 years being grateful for whatever Richard Morrison was willing to give me, instead of understanding what I was actually worth in the marketplace. That gratitude kept me from pursuing opportunities that would have advanced my career years earlier. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. "But how do you know when it's time to leave versus when it's worth staying and fighting for better treatment?" "That's the perfect question," I replied. "In my experience, you know it's time to leave when you find yourself making excuses for Treatment you wouldn't accept in any other relationship. When you're working harder to justify staying, then you would need to work to find something better. I talked about the importance of building relationships outside your current company. The way my coffee meetings with Diana had created opportunities I never would have discovered otherwise. I discussed the value of documenting your achievements, not just for performance reviews, but for your own clarity about what you'd accomplished. The third lesson is about recognizing patterns versus isolated incidents. Richard's decision to cut my salary wasn't an anomaly. It was part of a pattern of undervaluing employees while overvaluing himself. If you're seeing patterns of disrespect, broken promises, or favoritism, those patterns will continue regardless of how loyal you are. The questions came rapidly after that. People wanted to know about negotiation strategies, about building confidence to make major career moves, about recognizing toxic workplace cultures before they damaged your self-worth. But the question that stuck with me came from a young man near the back of the room. Do you ever regret not trying harder to make it work at Morrison & Associates? I thought about that question for a moment before answering. Never. Not for a single day. Because trying harder would have meant accepting that my contributions weren't worth fair compensation. It would have meant enabling Richard's poor leadership instead of holding him accountable for it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a relationship, professional or personal, is to stop making it easy for the other person to treat you badly. The applause that followed was warm and sustained. But more importantly, I could see recognition in people's faces. These were professionals who understood that they had choices, even when those choices felt scary or uncertain. After the formal presentation, people approached me individually with their own stories. A marketing coordinator whose boss took credit for her campaigns. An account manager whose raise had been deferred for 3 consecutive years. A graphic designer whose creative ideas were consistently dismissed until someone else presented the same concepts. Each conversation reinforced what I'd learned from my own experience. Talented people often stay in situations that diminish them because they've been taught that gratitude and loyalty require accepting whatever treatment they receive. Breaking that cycle requires recognizing that your skills, dedication, and results have value that extends far beyond any single employer's willingness to acknowledge it. The speech notes I'd carried to that podium became a reminder of how much I'd grown in just 18 months. From someone who made excuses for poor treatment to someone who could teach others to recognize their own worth. That transformation was worth every difficult moment of leaving Morrison & Associates behind. Sometimes the most important lesson you can share is that you don't have to accept less than you deserve, no matter how grateful you think you should be for the opportunity to be undervalued. The promotion letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after I'd first walked into Diana's office as a desperate employee seeking advice. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant brought in the formal envelope with Hartwell Industries letterhead, marked Personal and Confidential. Congratulations, the letter began, on your promotion to Vice President of Marketing and Brand Strategy, effective immediately. Your leadership of our marketing division has exceeded every expectation we had when we first recruited you, and the Board of Directors has unanimously approved this advancement in recognition of your exceptional contributions to Hartwell Industries. Continued growth and success. I read the letter 3 times, still processing the magnitude of what had happened in 12 months. From head of client relations making $65,000 annually to vice president making $150,000 plus equity, it wasn't just a career advancement, it was a complete transformation of my professional trajectory. The promotion came with expanded responsibilities, oversight of all marketing functions, a team of 22 professionals, and a seat on the executive leadership team. But more than the title or the salary, it represented something I'd never experienced at Morrison & Associates. Recognition that aligned with contribution, advancement that matched performance, and leadership that invested in my growth rather than simply managing my output. Diana knocked on my office door an hour after I'd received the letter. Do you have a few minutes to talk about your new role? I'm still processing that I have a new role, I admitted, gesturing to the promotion letter on my desk. You've earned it, she said simply. The marketing division's performance over the past year has been extraordinary. Revenue attribution up 300%, brand awareness increased by 60%, and we've successfully launched 4 major product lines with marketing strategies that exceeded every projection. More importantly, you've built a team culture that attracts top talent and delivers consistent results. She settled into the chair across from my desk, the same position she'd been in when she first offered me this opportunity. But I wanted to talk to you about something beyond the promotion. What's that? The ripple effect of the choice you made a year ago. Do you realize how many people you've influenced by refusing to accept less than you were worth? I thought about the former Morrison & Associates employees who had found better positions, the young professionals who had approached me after speaking events, the colleagues who had shared their own stories of standing up for their value. I never intended to influence anyone, I said. I was just trying to save my own career. That's exactly why your influence has been so powerful, Diana replied. You weren't trying to make a statement. You were just refusing to accept mistreatment. But by doing that, you gave other people permission to recognize their own worth. She was right. Marcus Thompson had parlayed his position at Digital Dynamics into a senior role at a Fortune 500 company. Sarah Chen had started her own design consultancy and was thriving as an independent professional. Even Jenny Martinez had become the operations director at a nonprofit, using her skills to support a mission she believed in. The beautiful irony, Diana continued, is that Richard Morrison thought he was saving money by cutting your salary. Instead, he destroyed his company and launched your career. He thought he was teaching you a lesson about gratitude and loyalty. Instead, he taught you about recognizing your value and refusing to accept less than you deserve. I pulled out my phone and showed Diana a text I'd received that morning from one of the young professionals who had attended my speech months earlier. Gave my notice today after they passed me over for promotion again. Starting my new job next month with a 40% salary increase. Thank you for showing me that I didn't have to settle. This is why your story matters, Diana said, reading the text. Not because it's unique, but because it's universal. Too many talented people accept less than their worth because they've been taught that gratitude requires settling for whatever they're offered. As Diana prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Emma, I want you to know that recruiting you wasn't just good for Hartwell Industries. It was good for our entire industry. You've raised the bar for what marketing leadership looks like, and that benefits everyone. After she left, I sat in my corner office, now even larger, with a view that stretched to the mountains, and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Richard's betrayal had felt like the end of something when it happened, but it had actually been the beginning of everything I'd never dared to imagine. The promotion letter on my desk represented more than career advancement. It was proof that refusing to accept poor treatment leads to opportunities that accepting it never could. Every difficult moment of leaving Morrison & Associates had been worth it for this. Work that challenged me, leadership that supported me, and compensation that reflected my contributions. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to the Young Professionals Network, offering to speak again about workplace dynamics and career development. If my experience could help even one person recognize their worth sooner than I had recognized mine, then everything I'd been through had additional meaning beyond my own success. The final irony was perfect. Richard had tried to teach me humility by cutting my salary, but instead he had taught me confidence. He had tried to demonstrate my dependence on his company, but instead, he had revealed my independence. He had tried to diminish my value, but instead, he had forced me to discover just how much I was actually worth. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly how much better you deserve to be treated. Richard Morrison had given me that gift, though I doubt he'll ever understand that his betrayal was the catalyst for everything good that followed. Share your own stories in the comments below, because recognizing your worth is the first step toward receiving the respect and compensation you deserve.